A single line on a thin printed page. Position filled. Application unsuccessful. And at 48 years old, Arov folded that letter until the paper creased like a tired map. He set it on the kitchen table, watched the light from the street lamp fall across it. Then, foolish and quiet, he lit a match and burned the last page of his maybe one day life. The smoke tasted like regret. That was the hook. The moment the world shouted, "It's too late," and everything inside him answered, "Not yet." Arav had been a man of small safety for most of his life. He kept routines like a guardian keeps a gate. Wake at 6, small tea, commute. Numbers all day, come home, make dinner, pay bills, fall asleep with the television murmuring. He had talent once, the kind of bright, dangerous talent that does not fit inside spreadsheets. The hands that could sketch faces from memory. The voice that used to stammer out poems in a cramped college room. Life, then mortgage, then children, then time, and slowly the talent was shelved like an old coat. His daughter Fatima was 30 and kind in a gentle, tired way. She had watched him shrink around his own dreams and carry 1,000 quiet apologies instead. Once she found his old sketchbook beneath the bed, pages brittle with abandoned sketches. She said nothing, but one night left it open on his pillow with a sticky note. Start tonight, not tomorrow. Tonight. What the rejection letter did was not destroy him. It cracked him open. The first lesson arrived like that crack. Decisions beat excuses. For 48 years, he had postponed himself with reasons, responsibilities, timing, fear. The letter removed excuses and left only two things: a life not lived and a choice. He started small. That was lesson 2. Arav drew for 10 minutes the first night, only 10 minutes, tracing the silhouette of Fatima's profile from memory. His strokes were clumsy. The lines trembled. He felt foolish. He almost stopped, but he didn't. 10 minutes became 20. 20 became 40. He realized the compounding power of tiny actions, small habits, monumental results. The city where Arav lived breathed like a living portrait. Markets, low-humming traffic, trains like breathing beasts. The neighborhoods changed, and yet people's struggles were the same. Fear of judgment, fear of failing late in life, fear of the mockery of friends. Arav kept his change quiet. He did not post selfies with paint-smudged hands. He didn't need applause. He needed to transform quietly, with the patience of a man learning to rebuild stone by stone. A catalyst arrived in a way he hadn't predicted. The local cultural club announced a public gallery night, inviting submissions from new and established artists. Arav felt the old knee-jerk reaction. I'm not ready. I can't compete. But Fatima, who had watched him in silence through those 10-minute nights, pushed a folded leaflet toward him one evening and said, "Submit one piece, just one. You owe yourself that." So he chose a portrait, not polished, not ambitious, a portrait of Fatima as a child holding a paper boat. As he painted, the work became an offering and a confession. The portrait wasn't only a child, it was memory and a promise. He labored, erased, painted again. Each mistake was not failure, but correction. Lesson 3 unfolded. Failure is not the opposite of progress. It is part of progress. On the night of the gallery, Arav wrapped his piece and walked into a room, buzzing with confidence and celebrity smiles. He hung the painting in a back corner, far from the bright installations and the flashy sculptures. He did not want to be seen as the desperate latecomer. He only wanted the painting to exist on the wall, to be a testament that he had begun. People came and went. Voices rose and fell like the tide. Arav lingered in the shadows, wondering if anyone would notice a man who came late to his own life. An elderly woman stopped before his painting and nodded slowly. "This voice," she said to a companion, "this has waited a long time to be heard." She touched the corner of the canvas as if she recognized a long, silent song. A gallery owner approached him later. She did not praise loudly. She only asked, "Did you make this?" Arav answered yes, his voice small. She told him she wanted to talk about a small exhibit, nothing dramatic, just a table where he could place 3 pieces. This was not instant vindication. It was a small door, a dim corridor opening to a new room. But the lesson was clear. Sometimes the world does not grant miracles. It offers opportunities, and you must take them. As weeks passed, he painted more. He learned to accept critique without collapsing. He learned that real work required repeating the humble acts others called small, showing up, refining, listening, practicing. He learned the magician's secret. Consistency is the quiet alchemy of transformation. People began to notice, not because he had become famous overnight, but because he had stopped pretending his life was someone else's and began to live it fully. Arav's growth carried a cost. The safety that had protected him, routine, the predictability of numbers, loosened. He negotiated with his wife Zara, who had been patient yet concerned. He explained his nights of painting, the quiet exhibitions, the small sales. She worried about the mortgage, about retirement. He promised prudence. He also promised himself honesty. Their conversations were the raw work of partnership. Lesson 4, transformation asks for sacrifice and honest communication. At work, things shifted too. A younger colleague, Amir, mocked his new hobby at first. But as Arav continued, Amir asked about the techniques, then about the thought behind a canvas. A conversation began, not about money but about meaning. The ripple effect arrived slowly. Your courage invites other people to remember their own. Midway through this journey, a harsh test appeared. Zara fell ill, sudden and scary. The hospital corridor seemed endless. Time contracted and opened like a painful wound. Suddenly, the too late fear had a new shape. The fear that there would be insufficient time to both heal love and continue to become. Arav felt terror anchor itself in his chest. He wanted to retreat to the comfort of numbers, of predictable rhythms. Instead, he brought a small canvas to the hospital. He painted Zara's hands as she slept, the lines deepening with every brushstroke, the colors an ode to the life they had built. In that sterile and fluorescent place, he learned lesson 5. Art and work are not always separate. Your pursuit can become your shelter. Painting steadied him. Painting reminded him that life retains meaning even amid fear. Zara recovered slowly. The lies he had told himself, that stability must be safe and dreams must be postponed, were revealed as half-truths. Real life is messy. The idea that it is too late is cruel and often untrue. He learned to accept that life would always require balancing art and obligation, hope and duty. That balance was not a compromise. It was a forging of something stronger. Months later, a local magazine published a short piece on Arav's work, a short, modest paragraph that described a late bloom painter. He read it with a private smile. Fame did not arrive with blare of trumpets. It arrived in circles. A client who commissioned a portrait, a panel that invited him to speak about creativity in later life, a student who hung on to his every word in a local workshop. The student was a woman who had once wanted to be a violinist and had quit after marriage. She asked him, "How do you begin?" He said the honest truth, you begin by forgiving your past in order to move forward. The character of Arav changed not because he finally succeeded at everything, but because he altered the script inside his head. He stopped saying, "I am someone who failed before," and started saying, "I am someone who begins again." That tiny shift, identity before action, was lesson 6. The person you must become is a person who starts. There was a turning point one stormy evening that became the climax of his inner journey. The cultural club invited him to give a small talk about his work. He stood before a room of neighbors, colleagues, and strangers. He felt the old fear pressed like a hand on his throat. He remembered the letter and the match. How long had he smoldered with that smoke? He considered stepping back. Then he looked at the front row and saw Fatma, her hands clenched, her eyes wet with pride. He looked at Zara, who squeezed his shoulder. He looked at Amir, who nodded awkwardly but supportively. He realized the stage was not a place of judgment, but of truth. He took a breath and told the story of the paper, the match, the 10 minutes, the small habits, the hospital painting, the student who began again. He spoke the lessons plainly without flourish. The room was silent. At the end, a woman stood up and said, "My husband told me it was too late for our dreams." Her voice trembled. "But you make me believe it might not be." People came forward to talk to him for hours. No single moment was magical. Instead, a community was made intimate and real. In that silence after the talk, Arav felt something he had not felt in decades. Not triumph, but completion. A quiet belonging that came from showing up wholly. He had become what the stories call a late bloomer. But the title felt unimportant. The lessons mattered more. Decide, act small, accept failure as practice, communicate honestly, use your work as shelter, and change your identity by showing up. These are not exotic rules. They are the daily, sacramental practices of people who refuse to let time be an excuse. If there is one moral to take into the night, it is this: time does not belong to those who wait, it belongs to those who start.